This is how I think round one of fantasy football in 2024 should be going. I've averaged out ESPN Sleeper and Underdog ADP to tell which players are most likely to go in round one, and then I'm going to rank them for there. For example, Jonathan Taylor, a guy I have as a top 10 player this year in fantasy, did not make the list because in most leagues he's going in the second round. Hopefully I can help you make the right decision this year, starting with pick number 12, Jahmyr Gibbs. Currently going at pick 14 on ESPN, 11 on Sleeper, and 12 on Underdog. In my eyes this year, it is very bad to be picking at the end of round one because the last couple guys in this tier are not on the same top tier as the top guys in round one. And you really don't get to make up for that in round two because the top end players in round two, like Marvin Harrison, Drake London, I don't think are that much better or better at all than the guys at the back like Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans. So if you're taking Jahmyr Gibbs here, obviously you need to be taking a wide receiver in round two. The thing with Jahmyr Gibbs is I think he has tier 1 RB upside if Dave Montgomery gets hurt. We saw the 3 games that made everybody fall in love with him last year were when Montgomery was out. But when it came to the fantasy football playoffs and the real life playoffs, Montgomery resumed his goal line work and he averaged like 13 to 15 carries a game. So this 16.5 points per game that I have Gibbs projected for is if Montgomery stays healthy the entire year. I still have Jahmyr scoring over 10 touchdowns easily. This offense is way too good and the O-line will keep him over 5 yards a carry efficiently. The Lions organization has also said they want to get him more receptions. He already had 52 last year. I'm not sure how many more he can get. I have him projected at 58. Then we go to player number 11, Puka Nacua at 16.6 points per game, currently going at 10 on all 3 sites. By now you guys know my stance on Nacua versus Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp is going to have more receptions and more touchdowns. He had way more red zone work in less games. But they are going to use Puka Nacua more downfield to have more yards at the end of the year than Kupp. And on an offense that should be extremely pass heavy with only 2 real options to catch balls, I would not be surprised if these two guys combine for like a 60% target share, which is really unheard of. I don't think there's ever been a team really with 2 wide receivers that get 30+%. But I mean, who are they going to throw to? Tyler Higbee's going to miss most of the year. Kyren Williams, they really stopped throwing to at the end of the season. And their third wide receiver, I mean, Demarcus Robinson, he's fine. He's not going to earn more than like 12%. This could be one of those vintage Matthew Stafford seasons where everyone's finally healthy and he does throw over 5,000 yards again. At pick number 10, we move up to A.J. Brown at 17.5 points per game, 11th overall on ESPN, and then 9th on Sleeper and Underdog. Now, if you watch my wide receivers video, I recently had him projected at 16.6 points, but my tune is changing a little bit on him. 2 years ago, the Eagles are the #1 paced offense in the league. Last year they were 17th, and that was mainly due to coaching. Now they bring in Kellen Moore, who's always been very fast paced. His days on both the Cowboys and the Chargers are both extremely pass heavy. And while I don't think Hurts is quite the quarterback in terms of throwing the ball as Dak or Herbert, he can definitely get it done, especially with this amazing supporting cast. There have also been reports saying that A.J. Brown is going to play more from the slot than he ever has. We know that Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb have both dominated those positions on Kellen Moore offenses. So I gave him a couple more receptions. He should get some easier targets, and he's pushing about 1,500 yards again. And there is that slight upside case where if anything does happen to Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown could see like 10 to 12 targets a game. That would be insane. Number 9 for me is where I very heavily disagree with the market. I got Bijan Robinson at 17.9 points per game. He's 5th on ESPN, 6th on Sleeper, and 7th on Underdog. As much as people love to hate on Arthur Smith, he can design a pretty good run game. Bijan was 2nd in the NFL in targets for running backs. Now, obviously this year he's not going to be splitting as much work with Tyler Algier. Don't think it's going to be like this 90 to 10% split that everyone else does. I think it's more like 75-25. And while this offense will definitely score more points and be better under Kirk Cousins, I am a little worried that they'll be too pass heavy where he doesn't get over like 260 plus carries in the year, but he should still be a top 5 running back in terms of targets. On the bright side for the Falcons, they were projected this year to score 25 points per game. That's 6 more than last year. It is such a massive upgrade. And they still have a top 10 offensive line, so he will be efficient. Moving on to number 8, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 18.8 points per game. He's pick 7 on ESPN and Sleeper and pick 6 on Underdog. Amon-Ra St. Brown in full PPR, which is what my points per game are in, is such a cheat code. He's going to average almost 19 a game very easily. Extremely safe option. Should see 10 plus targets fairly simply. He's in a top 3 offense with a great O-line that's going to keep Jared Goff healthy and upright. And we know Jared Goff is much better when he's not under pressure. I don't see anyone in this offense really threatening Amon-Ra for his targets. He'll get like 8 to 9 to 10 a game. But as an actual wide receiver talent, I don't see him taking that leap into the Jefferson, CD, Jamar, Tyreek territory. His ADOT is just far too low. It's between like 11 and 13 every year. He just doesn't run far enough routes downfield, and he's just not a good enough route runner for it. He's pretty quick and nimble in tight areas, but he doesn't quite have that deep burner downfield speed. You know who does though? That's going to be Garrett Wilson at pick 7. 20 points per game for me, 9th on ESPN, the 12th pick on ESPN, and the 11th pick on Underdog. Clearly, I'm much higher than the market. Wilson saw 168 targets last year, but only caught 95 balls. This efficiency is so bad. But we we know that is obviously on the quarterbacks, and any receiver that gets that type of target share, like Tyreek Hill he's gotten over the past 3 years, always finishes between 110 and 120 catches. So with an upgrade at quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and a history of like that Davante Adams type of, I'm just going to keep targeting this one type of receiver, I think Garrett Wilson has real insane upside. His route running has the potential to be top 5 in the league, and his run after catch ability has been unseen really in the NFL so far, but back in college, that was what he was great at. And now I think they're going to scheme up a lot of plays where Aaron just gets those quick outs to the sideline and lets him do his thing. Easy receptions for us in fantasy. Not to mention, we all remember when Davante Adams missed 4 games and still scored 18 touchdowns in a season with Rodgers. When they get to the goal line, they're going to use Wilson. And speaking of the goal line, the Jets had 3 goal line attempts in the entire season last year. That's how bad they were on offense. It's pretty common for us to see horrible teams a year before take a big leap forward the next year, but there's some situations that are just way worse than others, and that was the Jets last year. The only situation in recent memory that was almost as bad was the Bears 2 years ago when Justin Fields threw the ball at like the lowest rate we've ever seen. And we saw the next year when DJ Moore came over, he had a huge blow-up season, so something's going to happen with Garrett Wilson that we just have never seen before. And on that same train of thought, my number 6 player is Breece Hall, slightly higher at 20.5 points per game. He's 3rd overall on ESPN, 8th on Sleeper, and 8th on Underdog. Clearly, ESPN is something with running backs. Breece Hall already led the league in receptions last year, and that's with the first half of the year, him playing between 30 and 60% of snaps, and the final couple games, they gave him 70 to 80%, and that's when he won everybody a fantasy football championship. Now, granted, in some of those games, he saw like 12 to 13 targets. That's not going to happen again with Rodgers, but we also have to take into account that the beginning of the season when he literally got like 5 carries in a couple games, no targets at all, that is not going to happen again either. And the biggest thing with running backs is we know they have to be on good offenses so they can score a lot of touchdowns. Last year, he was on the worst offense we've maybe ever seen. He already scored 9 touchdowns. On top of that, we see running backs like Raheem Mostert, Gus Edwards getting 15 plus goal line carries. This poor dude saw 1 of those last year. Not to mention, I am completely in shock that he averaged 4.5 yards per carry in the worst situation in the world, where everyone knows that they can't run behind that O-line and they're never leading in a game, so they can never run from the lead. And he's coming off a torn ACL. How is this dude so good? He averaged nearly 6 his rookie year, 4.5 in those circumstances. That's better than what Saquon did when he came back. Year 2 is when everybody knows that running backs go off. And by year 2, I mean the second year removed from that ACL tear. And the thing that really sets him apart from Bijan Robinson is there's no Tyler Algier to even take away 25% of the workload. I think he's going to be one of the top 3 running backs in the league in usage, kind of like Kyren Williams was last year. Braylon Allen is cool and all, but he is not taking anything away from Breece. He's way too raw of a prospect. Now we get to the top 5. Jamar Chase is my number 5 at 20.7 points per game. He's 6th overall on ESPN, 5th on Sleeper, and 4th on Underdog. I'm basically in line here. I still have a little bit of worry with him because of Joe Burrow's wrist injury, so personally, I have not been taking a lot of him. And on top of that, we really haven't seen him be quite as insane as he was his rookie year because defenses are playing a complete cover 2 shell over the Bengals now. They know what he can do deep downfield, which is why his average yards of reception went from 18 his rookie year to 12 in his past 2 years. But in turn, that means he's been getting more receptions per game because they're using him closer to the line of scrimmage, and in different ways, they're scheming him open. I will say I was a little disappointed in him last year. Even with the backups, he only had 5 games over 15 plus fantasy points. That's not going to cut it. Justin Jefferson was in a worse situation off a hamstring injury, and he still easily did that. So while I hear a lot of other fantasy creators talk about he's the sleeper wide receiver 1 overall this year, he can really just crush everything, I am not on the same train. I think there are too many limitations for him. But number 4, CeeDee Lamb definitely could be the wide receiver 1 overall. Again, I have him at 22 points per game. He's going at number 2 on every single site. Now, me having him down at number 4 is nothing against CeeDee Lamb really himself. I just value the top 2 receivers much higher than him. In terms of raw talent and what they can do on a football field with worse quarterback play, I just trust them more. But as for the CeeDee Lamb good side, they added absolutely no target competition to this team. It is still Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Ferguson, a couple running backs like Zeke Elliott, who, by the way, caught as many balls as Jahmyr Gibbs did last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's like 3rd or 4th in the team in targets. But overall, in my eyes, CeeDee Lamb is basically like Amon-Ra St. Brown with just that more higher-end downfield upside. Now for the first wide receiver I have over CeeDee at pick 3, Justin Jefferson, 22.3 points per game. ESPN's ADP is 8th, Sleepers is 4th, and Underdog is 5th. I'm clearly much higher than the crowd. My reasoning for this is pretty damn simple. We knew last year that he was the wide receiver 1, 2, 3, somewhere in there going into the season, and he still performed that. Going through the weeks when Kirk Cousins was healthy and he was healthy, everything was great. The problems arose when he obviously came back from the hamstring, and a couple games he was dealing with it again. But then for the final 4 games of the season with Nick Mullins and all these crap quarterbacks, he averaged 22.4 points per game. And Nick Mullins is a complete random that's been around the league starting on the 49ers Steelers a couple times when Jimmy G was down. But when he came to the Vikings, he had 2 almost 400-yard passing games. And the reason for that is, one, obviously Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, but the main thing is Kevin O'Connell and this team want to be the most pass-happy team in the entire NFL. They have a great run-blocking offensive line, 2 of the best tackles in the league. And now with TJ Hockenson missing a good portion of the season, maybe even the entire season, Jefferson is going to have such an insane target share. And the thing with Jefferson that we haven't quite seen yet is he can really break out by just scoring more touchdowns. He's never eclipsed 10 once in his career. So all these insane fantasy performances we've already seen with that is just based off receptions and yards alone. Whether it's Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy starting, I'm really not worried because both those guys are better players than Nick Mullins. And bringing in Aaron Jones, a great pass-catching running back, almost signifies that they still want to be very pass-heavy again. Now we get to number 2, Christian McCaffrey at 23.4 points per game. He's number 1 on all 3 of the sites. If you're in a 2 running back league where you start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, I'm totally fine with CMC over number 1. But if you start 3 wide receivers do become super important, and I'm going to go with my guy at number 1, which is, if you haven't guessed it, Tyreek Hill at 24 points per game. He's going at 4th or 3rd across the sites. They're both amazing players, but the difference is Tyreek Hill was averaging 26 points per game before he got hurt in week 14. CMC did finish with about 24.5. I still have McCaffrey scoring 20 plus touchdowns this year, but it's not going to be enough because Tyreek Hill is going for 2,000 yards. Next video, I'm going to do how round 2 should go, so drop a follow so you don't miss that.